From the foundation model perspective, and we have a lot of good models, right? Anthropic models, right? And Gemini models, right? OpenAI models. However, what make the ChatGPT difference is agentic features, right? Think about it, right? And I'm pretty sure right, you use ChatGPT all the time. But what makes ChatGPT different? I think that's the secret sauce. And also my prediction is like GPT-5 is not a model, it's an agent. I think also maybe, 5 years later, everyone gonna have this R2D2, right? And we all like R2D2. I think that's a clearly trend, right? And we all have our digital companion physically. If we already have an open search base, knowledge base, you can easily add another layer of the RAG on top of it, right? Build a decent enough RAG system. And however, your data refreshing, data management system can be as the same as they have today. You don't have to redo everything. So this is one possible way, right, to move this RAG system forward quickly.
Welcome to Data Framed. This is Richie. AI agents are the hottest of hot topics, but there's a big leap from your CEO declaring your company to be all in on AI agents to actually getting some value from them, especially in an enterprise setting. So today we're going to try and figure out how to cross that chasm. I want to know how to make your organization AI agent ready, how to manage your corporate data for use with AI agents, and how to manage and govern those AI agents once they're in production. Our guest is Jun Qian, the VP of Generative AI Services at Oracle. Jun oversees the development of Oracle's Generative AI Services, Generative AI Agents, and Code Assist platform. In his career, Jun's been responsible for creating some pretty high-profile AI products. At Microsoft, he founded Microsoft Power Virtual Agent, now part of Copilot Studio, and Jun also ran the AI and machine learning department at fraud detection platform SIF. So, Jun certainly knows a thing or two about getting AI into the enterprise. Let's hear his advice on adopting AI agents. Hi, Jun. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Richard. Nice to meet you.
At the moment, I think AI agents are the hottest topic around. So, first of all, can you just tell me what's the coolest AI agent you've seen so far?
That's a very tricky question. I think you know it. You use it every single day.
Go on. What's that?
Yeah, which is ChatGPT.
Okay, so we're counting ChatGPT as an agent now, then.
Yes, I think we think about it, right? And everyone have the model access for OpenAI models. But why and the ChatGPT experience is quite different from a lot of agent you saw, right? And then think about, right? And go back to 12 months and even more than 12 months, right? When ChatGPT first started, it's missing a lot of features. For example, web search features and the memory features, code generation features, right? Some now actually it's generally code around the code, right? So think about it, right? And from the foundation model perspective, right? And we have a lot of good models, right? Anthropic models, right? And Gemini models, right? OpenAI models. However, what make the ChatGPT difference is agentic features, right? Think about it, right? And I'm pretty sure right, you use ChatGPT all the time. But what makes ChatGPT different? I think that's the secret sauce. And also, my prediction is like GPT-5 is not a model; it's an agent.
Interesting. That would be very cool. And I certainly am right there with you that just having these simple sort of tool use features, being able to search the web, being able to just interact with like Python or whatever code tools, it just makes such a difference to like the quality and the range of things that you can do well with generative AI.
Yeah, and also key thing is memory. Memory is also very important because right, and you probably noticed right, and OpenAI launched called memory features, right, and not long ago, right, 6 months ago. However, they're actually using these memory features for more than 6 months ago, right? If you go to your ChatGPT settings, you can actually see what they memorized, all the conversations you had with ChatGPT. And also, there's another secret command you can type in ChatGPT called BIO. We just had a BIO into ChatGPT. You can see all your informations they saved for you. So I think that's one of the secrets, right? And that's why it makes ChatGPT so relevant to a lot of questions you have. But I think that's agent, right? So memory, tool calling, that's the key component of the agents. Yeah.
Yeah, so the ChatGPT memory feature is really interesting because I went into my settings, had a look at like what it was remembering about me. It thought I was really into ultra running, which is very odd. I'm very sure like I will go jogging once a year, so I don't know where it's got that idea from. So yeah, you just need to be careful that it is remembering the right things about you. I know at Oracle you've just launched a RAG agent. Talk me through what is that and what's it for?
Correct, correct. I think everybody knows RAG, right? And we don't need to explain what is RAG. And however, I think why it makes RAG so popular if we ask these questions. For example, Richie, I think you know the RAG concept. From your perspective, what do you think? Why is RAG suddenly get too popular, right? And remember about 8 years back, right? We had chatbot, right? And everyone's building chatbot. But now everyone is building RAG-based chatbot. So what is the difference between the chatbot we built 8 years ago, now the RAG? So I'll give you my answer, right? Because 8 years ago, I was at Microsoft, right? We were building this chatbot for enterprise customers, right? At that time, we built chatbot for Macy's, for HP. And then what is the key challenge at that moment when we build a chatbot? In the high level, right, there's a two technology, right? When you build a chatbot, first one is we call it intent understanding. When you ask the questions, right, and then the model needs to understand what kind of questions you're asking. We call it intent classifier. This is a very generic NLP technology, right? Just like Alexa, Siri, they all have similar technology, right? You ask questions, they try to identify what is your intent. In the high level, you can think about it as a classification problems, right? So you can have like 100 intent, 200 intent, right? So that's the first step, right? When you ask the questions, the model try to understand what's your intent. And the second part is once you understand the intent, and it will try to give you an answer. And so essentially, you will hard code all these answers related to this intent. Again, I'm trying to simplify the problem. And now you have this intent classification and the knowledge retrieval, kind of like two part, like build this chatbot. But what's the problem? The problem is most of the chatbot cannot follow up your questions because they don't understand the context. That's one challenge. And the second challenge is because your knowledge base has to keep updated all the time, right? Because once you have a new product launch, then you have to update your answers. So this ongoing knowledge base maintenance become a challenge. And also when you ask the questions, right? For example, you ask, okay, what's your open hours in Christmas time for Macy? Right? And then you have to understand all these details, right? Date, time, location, right? We call it slot feelings, right? And you need to understand all the details, right? We can use classic NLP technology, right? Processing all the data. This is a classic NLP technology, right? Like 8 years ago, intent understanding, right? And knowledge building, and that's one of the parts. However, I think the challenge is this kind of chatbot, or you can think about Siri and Alexa as well. It's kind of silly, right? It can only answer specific question you have. You cannot really have a dialogue. So that's why the chatbot kind of get popular, solve a certain problem, but didn't really go too far. But now in this large language model world, you see how this large language model help to solve the problem. You don't need internet classification anymore, essentially, right? Because the language model understand your language really, really well. And secondly, all these large language model can very easily understand your follow-up questions. You don't need another guess, right? So basically, the built-in natural language understanding of the large language model is so advanced. So we just solved some of the critical problem. So you don't have any language understanding challenge anymore. And however, the second part issue still exists because, right, the reg system, right, you know the reg system, right, and so we still need to keep updating all the knowledge base or the database you have, right, keep all the knowledge. I think that part is still existing today, no matter what kind of reg implementation you use. How do you keep updating your knowledge base or your database, right, to reflect the question you're asking? I think this is still one of the challenges we're dealing with today. Yeah. So that's from the high level.
Absolutely. And it sounds very simple, but just the idea of having chatbots that your customers don't hate. That's just absolutely huge for so many organizations, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. I think one of the success use case we have, right? Because once we have the RAG system, right? And even we only have the generation model, you can see a lot of teams started building their own RAGs. Right? It's because from a high level, right? And a very simple knowledge, right? And if you already have a database, for example, if you already have your data in open search, right? You can simply do the, query, right, to the search to the open source database, right, and then you get the search result back. You do rerun, you do generation, or everybody understand, right? Even very simple few steps, you can already generate very useful system. Of course, right? We need to deal other issues, right, and knowledge updates, hallucination. However, just introduce a very simple right concept and can already solving a lot of issues, right? So, for example, right, and inside Oracle, right, we have this Slack channel, right? Essentially, you can ask questions when you run into issue. Oh, I cannot log in my laptop. I have the data string issues, right? Before we have the human support team, right, to open ticket for each question you ask. Now it's just like the automatic chatbot, right, RagBot, just answer the question. It directly give you the answers and the instructions. But I think it's just like a very simple implementation of the Rag in the support system can save a lot of the effort, right, and support effort at any enterprise, right? I think that's kind of a low-hanging fruit, right, to build a Rag system for support. And I think, right, that is a very basic starting point, and you can achieve dramatic results immediately.
Yeah, so I like that with these sort of large language models. Okay, you solve the sort of natural language understanding. You've solved a lot of the issues around context with RAG. It's like you've got accuracy from your knowledge base. But you mentioned the big challenge before, that keeping knowledge up to date and making sure you're retrieving exactly the right information um, in a scalable way, I guess. That seems to be the big problem. So it sounds like knowledge management, data management, these are the big challenges. Do you have any advice for organizations on how they can manage all this data for their agents, for their chatbots?
This actually go back to the traditional enterprise search problem. So let's say forget a rack, right? And you just want to build the enterprise search, right? Because search the same thing, right? You want the latest information. So essentially, you can think about, okay, yes, we're not born the ocean here, right? If you already have very good enterprise search system, right? For example, like a lot of teams using OpenSearch. If you already have your knowledge base and data in the OpenSearch, which you already keep refreshing regularly. So essentially, you already have a good knowledge base to start with. And then you can build the reg layer on top of it, right? So basically, you have the query rewriting and the re-rank and the generation. So you already build a very decent reg system to start with. Right, but again, that's not the end. So essentially, you already have a real-time RAG system with your existing knowledge-based management. So I think that's actually one of the interesting challenges in the enterprises, because when you saw a lot of the open source POC implementations, right, it sounds very easy, right? You can easily build a POC, right? And you can easily show the result. However, right, well, once you get enterprise customers, you will find the challenge, because a lot of the enterprise system, they already have a knowledge base, right? Clearly, it's a lot of effort if we want to rebuild the knowledge base, for example, using vector DBs. That would be huge effort and a lot of challenge. However, you can leverage the existing knowledge base systems, right? You don't have to rebuild everything from scratch. So for example, in this case, if a customer already have, let's say they already have an open search base, knowledge base, you can easily add another layer of the RAG on top of it, right? Build a decent enough RAG system. And however, your data refreshing, data management system can be as the same as they have today. You don't have to redo everything. So this is one possible way, right, to move this RAG system forward quickly, to have the team or enterprise systems, right, to adopt the RAG concept to start with.
Okay, so it sounds like if you've got really good enterprise like knowledge management, then creating that RAG layer like is just embed everything, throw it into a vector database. That's probably going to be give you a decent start. There was a big if though. That's like if you've got the good
Yes,
enterprise management
exactly,
system.
exactly,
So,
exactly. So that's actually get the second part. But if you just naively said, "Oh, okay, plug into this open search, right? I send a query, get a result back, I do a rerun generation, I'm done." Clearly, it's not. I give an example, right? When we started, I thought, "Wow, yeah, that sounds very straightforward," and then we run into issues. Why? Because the traditional search results, right? And if you don't do specifically chunking, it could return the whole documents. So you run a query, and the search system give a return the whole documents, which is not useful, right, for the further processing. So and which because once we get the results back, right, and we want to do the rerun, for example, to measure which result is bad. However, you just return the whole documents back. It won't helpful. So that way, then you have to think about, oh, okay, now our data ingestion pipeline actually need a change. But in this case, when you ingest data into the open search, then you have to change it, right? Instead of send the whole document as a single chunk, then you want to chunk into smaller pieces. And then for each smaller pieces, right? And for example, open source, they already have the built-in embedding mechanism, right? So basically, now you get into the second part, right? And how can you modify your existing knowledge management system? How do you modify your existing data ingestion process to make it better for the new RAG system? So I think that's exactly getting to the second phase of the RAG implementation, right? So the new phase is, oh, I just hook into the existing system and do re-ranking in generation and reflection. That's probably is an okay start. And then you get it, oh, that doesn't work, but some use cases, why? And then you get into, oh, actually, we need a more smarter chunking algorithms, right? So you get a second part of the problem. And then eventually you will get into the more concrete problem. For example, right, when you ingest the data, if you have some graphs, the image, the existing data ingestion pipeline may not work because you don't really processing all the image data. Then you get the next phase of the RAG system. So, oh, actually, we need to do this multimodality ingestion and the generation, right? So I think that's why I like your podcast, right? With that guy for the RAG 2.0. He's very practical. I don't remember his name. Yeah, because once you start building the system, layer by layer, problem by problem, then you get the deep and the deep of all these issues. However, if you just read a paper, read some blog, you don't build it, you won't be able to fully understand what are the challenges here. Clearly, opportunity is huge, but if you don't build it in real, you won't understand all these challenging issues we're facing in the real enterprise environment. Yeah.
okay, yeah. So that was Dower Keeler, one of the inventors of RAG, who was on the show recently talking about the place innovations in retrieval augmented generation. But yeah, so that's interesting. It seems like then you've got a very iterative process. So you're gonna start off, you're gonna have like some kind of chatbot, and then there's gonna be a lot of tuning goes on, just like figuring out all the algorithmic stuff to make it work properly. So you kind of covered the technical side. I'm curious as to who's involved, like on the talent side, like which teams or roles tend to be involved in this.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think generally speaking, right, and you need a data scientist, right? Engineering. Yeah, for example, in the RAG system, right? And it's of course you need the engineering team to do all the integration work. However, I think the data scientist is super critical, right? Because once you build the RAG system, how good it is, right? You need a measure, right? So essentially, right, you need a measure, not the single system. You want to measure the end-to-end accuracies and the recalls, right? This is typical data scientist work, right? We prepare the sample questions, right? We know the ground truth, right? You want to build the end-to-end evaluation data set to start with to systematically measure the improvement of your RAG system. So I think that's the one key part is, right? Not only naive build a RAG system, don't measure it, right? And of course, right, you have a human, right, and testing to measure result. However, you should build your evaluation data set. You should have a data scientist and measure this, right, systematically, and continue to improve your evaluation data set as well, right? You should add more and more questions, right, more and more answers, right, continuously to measure and improve your system.
Okay, so measuring does seem incredibly important. I agree. That's very much data scientist work. But what sort of metrics would you use to see does the system work or not? I mean, especially if it's non-deterministic, so you're going to get slightly different results each time. Talk me through it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, in the support scenarios, we have one key metric called deflection rate. So this is very standard across industry. Even 8 years ago, right, when I was in Microsoft, right, and this deflection rate is the question the bot can answer and without need a human involvement, right? For example, right, when we start, a deflection rate of 20% is pretty good, right? Essentially, 20% of question you can answer by bot accurately without talking to human. That's great. 20% is pretty higher 8 years ago, right? When we started this, so wow, you can solve 20% of the question. That's awesome. But nowadays, right, and for example, the rack system, the support system we build, we could even reach 80% deflection rate. So that's a dramatically improved, right? And for example, right, the experiment I had 8 years ago, right now, we can from like 20% to 70, 80%. That's a dramatic difference. So again, that's just one of the metrics you could measure, like a deflection rate. So, and we can use as one as a proxy of the and accuracy of the system.
Okay, that seems like a pretty useful measure. And I guess, do you need like is it gonna be largely around like end user measures, like this person found the answer to the question they wanted, or like they clicked on the first result, or it feels like you need like a whole suite of different measures or sort of different stages
Oh
of
yeah, yeah, yeah. This is one simple, right? For example, right, for any chatbot system, right, and once you provide answers, right, and if you don't have further questions, right, and they just quit the session. And however, if they continue to have questions, right, and there are always a button there, right, you can talk to human, for example, right. I think every single chatbot system has that functions. Right? So I think that's a good proxy. So if the customer don't click button, right, and talk to the humans, I think that's one very strong signal. And also, right, because when we generate answers, right, you also have the links, right, and if the customer clicks the links, right, that also very strong signal. That means, oh, okay, you provided the useful informations, right? Once they click a link, right, and can find their answers they need. So yeah, but I think, right, and all the chatbot system were built like Microsoft and Oracle, right, and also, right, and on this market, right, and this signal is very clear. Talk to human, and that's a very sound signal.
Oh yeah, that's true. It's like, oh, this chatbot's annoying. I want to speak to a human. That's a sign that your product is not working. That's yeah, very very clear.
Very straightforward, but very very useful.
Okay, actually, that's often my default behavior. It's like this chatbot silly, right? Straight to you. So I'd like to talk about some of the issues about adopting chatbots and agents within the enterprise. So I guess it seems like data privacy, data security are sort of top of mind in terms of the challenges. Can you talk me through what people should be worried about with these things?
Yeah, I think this is one of actually the advantage for the existing enterprise systems, right? Including Oracle, Microsoft, as traditionally, they're very strong on data privacy and the securities, right? Yeah, same thing. I remember you talked with the entitlement, right, in the previous podcast. I think that's actually it's very true, right? Because when you build a new rack system, right, and I think one of the key challenge is how to integrate it with existing enterprise system, including entitlement, right, and authorizations, right? Because certain information is only available for certain customers, right? You cannot dumbly index all your knowledge base, right, and then just throw it out, right? I think you probably saw some of the news, right, and some company build some rack system, and now every single employee get the same information as a CEO. I think the key thing is, right, and the security and the data privacy compliance is super, super important. Okay, so when you design your system, you had have this in your mind. How do you integrate with your existing security and authentication, authorization system, which is actually is very tricky. Because if you don't design your system carefully, including if you just dumbly index everything, I think it'll be very tricky. But the good news is a lot of the enterprise providers, including Oracle, like Microsoft, they already have very strong security and compliance policies. I think for us, right, if we start building the new agents or the generative AI solutions, we work very closely with all the security, legal, and compliance teams, right, within the organization and leverage their existing experience. I think that is the key things. I collaborate with your existing security, compliance, and the data privacy group. Every single solution we build, we always go through the security compliance reviews with the internal team. So make sure the solution we build is fully compliant and secure with your existing policies. You don't have to invent new things, but make sure the thing you build is right, secure and compliant with your existing policy. I think that's the key thing.
Okay, so yeah, in theory, the existing sort of enterprise software you're using, hopefully those policies that you've already developed over the years, they're just going to sort of naturally apply in the AI use cases. All right. One thing that's I was having a conversation with one data company's customers. They were struggling with okay, the technology works, but in terms of the organizational side of things, there's teams wanting to like get started with AI and like build things as quickly as they can, and then you've got a compliance team that is like, nope, 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 no, because they move a lot slower.
Yes,
Do you have
yes.
any sense of like how you can resolve this sort of tension between governance and speed?
Yes, exactly. I think that is our ongoing challenge. However, I think the challenge is also opportunities. I think the first question is why the compliance say no. Then you have to go back to I get a no every day. You have to dial back. So I think the question is you need to educate the team, right? For example, 2 years ago, right, when we started, right, a lot of our compliance legal don't really understand how the large language model Gen AI works, I think, right? And we spend a lot of time working together with our legal team, compliance team. It's more like an education as well as learning together. So I think the build a partnership is very important. Of course, right? And from the compliance legal perspective, it's so much risk from their perspective. They seem, oh, everything is so risk, right? If you model generate anything, how do we control this behavior? Right? I think it's more about education, right? And so service, for example, right? And we need to understand, oh, okay, large language model itself is also software, right? It's a piece of software. It's not like a magic things, right? And it's a piece of software. And then how do we control this behavior? How do we monitor the behaviors? And once they understand the concept, right? And once understand how do you control the behaviors of the large language model, and then they will have better understanding. Actually, sometimes we will provide even more insightful suggestions for you to solve the problem, right? And now our legal team is now get very knowledgeable, right? When we start discussing about compliance, data privacy, sometimes they are actually on our side, try to ask the people, and okay, this is not a legal issues, right? And as you do the zero data retention, right? You don't keep any data, yeah, it should be okay, right? Because we start some discussion with the partners, right? And then they understand the concept, then they can help you sometimes, right? And to even accelerate some of the process. I think the key thing is really build a partnership, right? And educate and your team, the legal compliance team, and also work together. It's not easy, right? I spend a lot of times, right, working very closely with it. But now, once they have the knowledge, right, once they have the understanding, and then it's become much, much easier. Of course, certain compliance you still have to do. For example, right, and we, like a Llama, when we launch Llama 3 model, so it's multimodality capability, we cannot launch in EU, right? Because that's just a law. We have to comply with the EU law. You cannot using the multimodality models, right, for Llama 3 and the Llama 4 model. Then in certain law, you have to comply. They just had no way around. But some of other things are more about, I think, the understanding, collaboration, and make sure, right, and we all on the same page.
Okay, yeah. So definitely in agreement that just educating different teams on like what's possible, what should be allowed, what's a good idea or what's a bad idea. That's really important. Um, and yeah, it sounds like the trick then is that you've just got to have some sort of agreement with these compliance teams on like general principles for what should be allowed in general, what shouldn't be allowed, and that should resolve most of the sort of use cases just to enable you to get on building
Yeah, yeah,
stuff.
yeah, exactly. I think I will put this way, in the beginning, you probably want to put extra effort, because from legal compliance teams, they also want to learn the new technology. Right, think, for example, I build a few POCs or demo to them, right, and I have some sessions, work session together with them to tell them, right, what exactly is the knowledge behind the scenes. I think that could help, right, them to understand the technology and in the long term to benefit you, right, to move the project forward more quickly, right? You don't have to repeat some of the discussions again and again, right? Once we truly understand and how the large language model get trained, right? And how the large language model get caught in the inferencing time. Once and they understand all these concepts, and it'll be much easier.
I just want to return to something you said a moment ago about not being able to use Llama for the large language model from Meta in the EU. This is something I'd not heard about. Do you want to talk me through what are the issues there?
I think they have policy, right? If you process image and there are certain restrictions in certain region, right? You cannot using the image processing features in the EU regions. I remember, right, when the Llama 3 started, right? I think Llama 3.3, right, started supporting image understanding features. However, I think that certain EU rules, right, you cannot process image. I think that's why we had to turn off the image processing features, right, in the EU regions, right? We only allow that in the US regions, for example. Yeah, that's one of the very specific rules we had to comply.
Okay, yeah, that definitely seems worth taking note of at the point where you're choosing your models and also deciding sort of where things are being deployed and
Yeah, I think again, that's actually go back to the data privacy and the sovereignty things, right? Each region and state, right, may have their own policies, right? For example, right, data privacy policies, right, in Singapore and Australia, right, and it could be different from the US. You had to really compliance, yeah, and with your local policies.
absolutely, yeah. Always a good idea to check all the different local policies around the world. Okay, so for organizations who are sort of wanting to get started with these things, we talked about having to put governance in place beforehand. Do you have any advice on like what are sort of good first use cases? Like, I don't know whether you can jump like straight to we're creating some fancy agent, or whether like you want to start with something simpler.
Oh yeah, I think I mentioned, right? I think RAG actually is a really good use case because, right, I think that it's a solve a lot of problems, right, to start with, right? And if you already have the knowledge base built today, right, for example, you already have some internal search systems and build a RAG system on top of it, I think that is very tangible, right? You can generate very tangible results. And for example, the use case I gave, right, and support the chatbot, quickly the system, right? I think that's a very tangible things, right? You could build and show immediate results, and of course, right, and a lot of other use cases, right? You can think about, but I think, right, to start from support channel, I think that should be a very decent starting point, and you can see some tangible results if you already have some knowledge base system, right, and inside the your company, I think that should be a very straightforward starting point.
Okay, so yeah, start with chatbots and then kind of work forward from there. I guess at the other extreme of things, so there are a few startups that are trying to have complete uh, like AI employees. So you've got Cognition Labs has this like Devin software engineer. There's like Julius AI has like an AI data scientist. EMA's trying to create like a universal AI employee. Like some really ambitious projects that I'm not quite sure work in entirely yet. Is there like a sweet spot for like where you should be aiming with agents?
Yeah, I think that's actually, if you think back, right, in the past 2 years, what are the two prominent use case about large language model? I think one probably we already talked about RAG, and then the second one is really code agent. I don't know. I'm pretty sure, right, you already tried some of the code tools, right? Like windsurf, right? Cursor. Yeah, I use Cursor as well. Yeah, in my spare time. So I think that if you're using Cursor for long enough, right, or any other code agent, they evolved quickly, right? And so start with is just complete your code, and then you can generate the whole code for you. And then they can read your repository, generate more complex code. And now they can generate the multi-steps, right? And basically you give a plan, they can execute, right? So you just from, for example, for any of this code generation tool, you can see they're evolving from very simple task completion to now kind of like a fully semi-auto coding tasks, right? They can run, for example, 20 minutes, right? All the tasks, right? And they can plan in the task and run all the tasks. Right? I think we call it async, right? And code agent, right? And the latest, I think, Codex and Cloudy Code, they already went into that direction. So clearly, I think a code generation, right, automation is one trend very clearly and is very productive already. I'm pretty sure, right, a lot of the developers, if you're not using code generation tools, right, you're probably out. Yeah, but again, go back to your question. I think, right, and this is I think it is still just the beginning, right? And we saw the adoptions. Right, internally, we also have the code generation tools where we developed, right, and in our team, where we called Oracle Code Assist, right? And we beta launched this service, right? And last year, right? And internally, and we have a lot of teams using it as well. So I think a code clearly is another trend. You probably we all know, right? The windsurf news, right? And all this news, right? Code. I think the code is clearly one winner, right? In this generative AI world, right? RAG code clearest winner, right? And we'll discover more use cases. I think this just started, right? And we clearly see some patterns. But I would assume, right? And once we get into deep into the applications, yeah, for example, right, I'm always thinking, right? Because I've been doing software more than 30 years. So we're always thinking, right? And is there any fundamental, like a computer system, operating system, right? And even compilers, right? And should we rethink some of the fundamental building block we are doing today, like operating systems, right? And for example, all the command line today we use still a little bit of dummy, right? And you need to do the find, the grab, whatever, right? And come out some of the information you need from your laptop, for example. However, think about, right? If you have a natural language interface, you should just like, oh, okay, can you find me the resume I saved in my disk, a month ago, and with the name blah blah, right? And then this smart command line should find the data for me. I don't need to run this crazy, Unix command, right, to find out information, right? And this could be built in very soon. I would assume, right, this should be available very soon as a part of a building your operating system, right? For example, when you get a Mac, right, you should already have this very smart command line, right? You don't need to remember all this Unix command anymore, right? It's just there.
That's funny. Yeah. So on the coding side, I'm right there with you. Like, if you don't know how to use these sort of AI assisted coding tools, then you're not going to make it as a software developer these days. I mean, I think the point is though that they're quite easy to use, so it's something that everyone should look into if you're writing code. But yeah, I do like that idea of just better software search. Like, there's so many times where um, yeah, I cannot find a file that I'm pretty sure I downloaded or I created like a while ago. Even like we use the Google Office suite, and
Yeah,
somehow, even though Google is a search company, like Google Drive search is absolutely terrible. Like they're supposed to be good at this stuff.
yeah, exactly. Same thing. Dropbox, all these things. So think about the software you're using every day. Clearly, there's a lot of things they can do better. So that's why if you think about it, and always get very excited. And basically, I'm thinking the software we built in the past 30 years can be rewritten in a dramatic way. I'll give you another example. Right, so we all know the web scraper. 5 years ago, when we built this web scraper, so oh, you get a HTML page, right? Then you try to do regular expressions, do all the things, try to match a certain data field, for example. However, every website is different, and then the website change all the time. And then you have to change your, web scraping tools, for example. However, these days, It's very simple. You just send this to large language model. You dump the HTML, send to the LLM, said, "Oh, I want this field." Then they will give you all the information back.
Oh yeah, I'm with you on that. Like web scraping is such a tedious task to do as a human. It's so annoying, and yeah, I do like that LLMs will do
Actually,
that a bit
yeah.
faster.
So actually, I like to do all the experimental things like in the weekend. I do two things, right? One thing is, oh, I just download the whole raw HTML. I send to the LLM. They give me all the answers back. Pretty decent. Another way is actually you take a screenshot, send to LLM, give the answer back too. So either way, it works perfect.
Nice. So yeah, lots of opportunities then I think for just making software better. So you mentioned the idea of like enterprise search and also just like operating system search. Since you've been in this game 30 years, do you have any more predictions on like things that can be improved using AI over the next few years?
Yeah, I think like for example, right? And if we this industry long enough, right? For example, 30 years back, right? I still remember when I was in high school, right? I heard also AI, the expert system. I was so excited. So, wow, expert system, that sounds great, right? And then I studying. I remember it's a Perlog, right? That's one of the language at that time. Perlog, right? They call this AI language. So I started using Perlog. I built my own expert system. And then I find out, oh, actually, the so-called expert system just everything else. I got quite disappointed. I said, wow, then you have to build all this knowledge base, knowledge graph, right? Handcraft, all these things. It's just like not practical, right? And then 30 years later, we have this large language model. Essentially, any of the large language today is a super, super smart expert system we cannot even imagine to build 30 years ago. Whereas if you 30 years ago, you can build an expert system like any of these large language today. It's like an impossible task. So that's why, yeah, I was so excited when this thing happens. I said, wow, finally, after 30 years, we finally built some decent expert system. So and then I think thinking forward, I think again, I think there's like plenty of things, even go back to 30, 50 years ago when we started thinking about the AI. And I think a lot of the vision and the pioneer had 50 years ago. Now we can finally implement them, like the Turing test, right? Oh, we finally and conquer it. And now the expert system, oh, we already built it. I think I probably could just go back to read all these old AI books to say what kind of dream they had 50 years. Maybe now it's become a reality.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like, there's just been so much progress over the last few decades. Hopefully, it's going to continue in this area because like stuff that we've been trying to get working for decades, it now actually does work. So,
Yeah, robotics. I think robotics probably next one. I was just joking with my kids. I think hopefully maybe 5 years later, everyone gonna have this R2D2, right? And we all like R2D2. I think, right? I think that's I think that's a clearly trend, right? And we all have our digital companion physically, right? And now today we already have this digital companion like ChatGPT kind of thing. However, I think after 5 years, I would assume, right, we will all have our little cute robots with us. And we will all have the autonomous driving, I would assume, right? I don't particularly like drive myself, I think, right? And, autonomous driving should be there, right, in 10 years, right? Why we need to drive, right? And we have all this Waymo, right? And the Tesla, we're building autonomous driving. I think this reality is already here. And just on the hidden side, right? A lot of things are already happening. We just didn't realize. Yeah.
Jensen Huang earlier this year, the CEO of NVIDIA, he was talking about physical AI being the next big wave, which I think is just a rebranding of robotics. But yeah, it seems like this is going to be an important big thing.
That's exactly the thing. Like, for example, right, the robotic thing that we have been envisioning for more than 50 years, now just become a reality. So I think we are just living in our own fantasy, right? We imagine all these things 50 years ago. Now it's happening one by one.
So, what's the impact then of physical AI? I presume it's going to hit manufacturing and industrial use cases first, is it?
Well, I think industry already happening. I'm not talking about how this impact our daily life. Actually, this is the only one area actually I do have concerns. If you have a physical robot in your home, how do you control it? if it's misbehavior, right? I think this actually, once you get into your daily life, I think there's a lot of things we have to think in carefully. If you build a small, cute robot dog, probably it's okay. However, if you have like a really human bot, right, can lifting things, right, and can do all the heavy labor work, but what happened is out of control, right? And actually, I do have concerns. I put such huge human body in my house, right? Not only privacy, it's just like what happened to the malfunction?
Yeah, well, I mean, Isaac Asimov, he wrote hundreds of books on this topic. It's like robots going wrong all over the
Yeah,
place.
it's all over the place. Yeah, I think that's kind of like, yes, I'm always optimistic about technology. However, I think, right, and once we get into the physical space, I think, right, we definitely need a more careful. How do we design these robots, right, can co-live with us peacefully, right? I think that's going to be one of the things we have to thinking right now. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely some potentially great things or potentially very scary things going on. Like Terminator was not necessarily a happy movie. So yeah, before we wrap up, I'd love to talk a bit about Stargate because Oracle's obviously involved in this. It's a ridiculously large infrastructure project. Can you just tell us a bit about it?
Yeah. I think you already saw all the news, and I won't repeat, right? But however, I think I would like more think about from computing perspective, right? And for example, right, when we start building all the GPU clusters, right, and to start with like 1,000 GPUs, right, back to 3 years ago, right? For example, when the GPT-2, GPT-3 OpenAI when they started, right? I think about like probably thousands of GPUs, right, to build the large language models. You probably heard from Elon, right? He built like a 100K H100 in his Memphis, right, data center. And now the Stargate, right, is already close to equivalent, right, about the 500K H100 skills, right? So basically, think about it, right? This computing infrastructure, right, is getting more and more powerful, right? And it's very soon, right? We're gonna have a 1 million GPUs, right, in a single GPU clusters, right? I think that's kind of the target, right? And like Stargate, and also other provider too, right? I think Microsoft and Amazon, right, Meta, they all trying to build the large scale GPU clusters. I think what's unique about the Oracle OpenAI collaboration is, right, this is huge GPU clusters in many regions, right? The Texas one is just the first one, right? You probably heard, right? We're gonna build one in the Middle East, right? And we're also working with a lot of the state and governments, right, building the large GPU cluster for them, right? I think this is just another starting point. And we just dramatically change our GPU infrastructures to start with, right? And a more generic is more the computing infrastructures, right? Back to that was 10 years ago, right? And when I lead a team, right, launched the first Amazon machine learning service, right? We're only talking about a CPU, so hundreds of CPUs. But now we're talking about thousand, even millions of the GPUs. It's only 10 years, right? And we dramatically already advanced the whole computing industry. So given another 5 years, right? And that's why I think, I'm super excited, right? And because from the computing infrastructure, right, computer science perspective, it's just like a so dramatic change in the past few years. And this gonna lead us to many things, right? It's very hard to predict, I put it this way. Yeah.
Having 1 million GPUs in a single cluster, that's just a ridiculous. I mean, it's a crazy ambitious engineering challenge. Can you talk us through like what are the benefits going to be? Like, what do you expect to come out of having such a massive compute infrastructure?
Yeah, I think one perspective is just iteration. For example, right, and let's just use in GPT-3 as example, right? And before it could take again, it could take you 12 months, right? Do one iterations. But now, if you 100x power, then you could do iteration super quickly, right? Everything else you could probably have one iteration, right? So the way you do I think Jeff did have very good uh, blog post about this, right? I think a couple years back. So essentially, you increase your iteration speed. That makes a huge difference, right? Before, for example, if you take your 3 months to experimental one algorithm, now probably gonna take you 3 weeks. And once you have more computing powers, right, you could take you to 3 days. So that means your innovation speed is accelerating. So that's the difference. It's not necessarily your model gets larger and larger. It's more about the iteration speed. And I think about it, then you could have more teams, right, doing all the experimentation in parallel once you have the computing powers. And then I think the innovation could accelerate. I think that makes a huge difference, right? It's not only about the size, it's really about the speed you innovate.
Okay, that's interesting because I had assumed it was just be like, okay, we're going to create some like giant new model, but actually just being able to create similar sized models but faster and being able to keep tweaking them, that does make a lot of
Exactly.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Before probably gonna, take 1 team 3 months to one iterations. Now you could have 100 team doing same thing. So basically you do 100x your iteration, right? I think that's gonna dramatically and accelerate, right? And no matter what you build, agent or foundation models, right? I think that can accelerate our AI revolutions.
Okay, yeah, certainly a bright future for being able to develop stuff once all that infrastructure is in place. Okay, cool. So just to finish up, what are you most excited about in the world of AI?
Yeah, I think for me, because I've been doing this computer science AI for a really long time, my thinking is still, I think it's still a lot of fundamental computing problem, right? I think one thing really excites me is I'm thinking is, right, how the way we build a computing system, right, and how the way we build a computing software could dramatically be changed in next few years. I think that's one dimensions, right? I was even thinking, should we just do we still need a compiler, for example, for building other things? Right? Is our current MacBook or Windows system, should we rebuild all this operating system as well? And again, I think that it was clearly a lot of things we could do, right? We could make our software computer system much smarter and much better. However, I think the second thing is I still believe they're scientific wise, right? We haven't made many breakthroughs. Of course, large language that's great. We still have a lot of potential, say build super powerful large language models, agents. But again, I think some of the fundamental technology like reinforcement learning is still 50 years ago, right? It's not many dramatic, I would say, right, scientific advancement yet. And I think, right, still have a lot of opportunities, right, developing new algorithm and have a new thing. I think another thing is maybe the current algorithm, large language model, for example, right, may get plateaued, right, in next few years. Then we still need to keep thinking. Put it this way, I don't think we done, right? We just started. And as a humanity, right, I think, right, large language is perfect, great, right? However, it can't solve all the problems. At the very beginning, I think, right, from a research science perspective, a lot of things, right? And I think we should continue to evolve, right, and continue to do more, not stop here, right? I know, right, large language model is great, right? We can build a lot of applications, but I still think there's a lot of potentials for science community, right? Continue to uh, involve, right? Continue to invent, right? Not stop here. Yeah.
Absolutely, I'm right there with you. Like a lot of the kind of basic scientific research questions, these are like very, very cool things to work on. There's a lot of ways that both data and AI can help out here. Hopefully, if we can speed up the scientific research, that's definitely going to be a big win for humanity. Wonderful. And just finally, I always want recommendations for people to follow. So, whose work are you most excited about?
I think not in particular, of course, right? Traditionally, like Andrew Capacity, right? Andrew N, right? Jeff Dean, and all these usual suspects follow them. And I started to follow, for example, like OpenAI, Anthropic, right? And because they're the top tiers, right? Frontier and DeepMind and all this, right? And enterprise, right? We follow them very closely. And yeah, I think be open minded, I'll put this way, and podcasts, right? Including your podcast, right? Things
Absolutely, got to follow data framed.
exactly. You get to follow data frame, right? The one you had with Reg 2.0, I think that's so fantastic. There's a lot of practical. I think My recommendation is just like listen and read as much as you can. Don't be biased by any one of them, right? The more you learn, right, and the longer you learn, then you can build your own judgment, right? And so, but don't bias by single person. For example, oh, I will only follow this person's blog or suggestion, and I think and be very open-minded and try to learn, right? And from different companies, right, different personnel, right, broadcast, podcast, YouTube, right, and anything, right, you could learn. And yeah, that's my suggestion. Yeah.
Definitely. I like the idea of just speaking to different people, getting different points of view. Yeah, I mean, I speak to different people on the podcast every week. I do like it when guests disagree with whoever that was last week said. Brilliant. Yeah, but good advice just to get all those different points of view. Super. Thank you so much for your time, Jun.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rich, for having me here. I'm super excited. You can see I'm super excited. I think we just started. Yeah, I think a long again, it's very exciting work ahead of us. But still, I think a long way to go, right? To fundamentally change how we do computing. And I think, right, we still have a lot of opportunities, and we can make a difference.
Absolutely. It's all about making a difference. All right. Thanks.
Okay, thanks so much for having me here, and very nice talking to you, Richard.